Somewhere in your yard right now, there may be a nest. You probably have not found it. Birds are extraordinarily good at building them in places humans do not think to look. Behind the downspout, inside the dense holly, in the fork of the oak branch that hangs over the fence where nobody ever looks up. And inside that nest, there may be eggs. But here is something that will happen in some of those nests this spring that most people never witness and almost nobody talks about. The parent bird will reach into the nest, pick up one of its own eggs, carry it to the edge, and drop it. Not a damaged egg, not a cold egg, not an egg that looks different from the others in any way a human observer could detect. A healthy egg, removed deliberately by the parent that laid it. Most people who discover an egg on the ground beneath a nest assume something went wrong. A predator disturbed the nest. The wind knocked it out. The nest structure failed somehow. They pick the egg up, try to figure out how to help, and never learn that the bird that built the nest put it there on purpose. The question of why a bird would remove its own egg, an egg it spent enormous energy producing, in a nest it spent days building, during a breeding season where every successful chick represents months of work, is one of the most revealing windows into how bird reproduction actually operates. And the answer is not simple. It is layered in ways that change how you understand everything you see at a nest. Welcome to Bird Minds. Today, we are going into exactly why birds remove eggs from their own nests, what they are detecting that you cannot, what the decision tells you about how bird reproduction actually works under pressure, and what one specific egg removal behavior reveals about a survival strategy so precise it took researchers decades to fully document. Stay until the end, because the final section covers a behavior that happens in nests across your neighborhood every spring that most people find genuinely difficult to believe when they first hear it. To understand why birds remove eggs, you first have to understand what incubation actually is. Most people think of a parent bird sitting on a nest as something passive. The bird is keeping the eggs warm, waiting, doing what birds do during the weeks before hatching. The reality is far more active than that. During incubation, the parent bird is in continuous contact with every egg beneath it. It rotates them regularly, sometimes dozens of times per day, to ensure even heat distribution and prevent the developing embryo from adhering to the inner membrane. It adjusts its position in response to temperature changes, pressing the eggs more firmly against its brood patch, a featherless, blood vessel-rich area of skin on its abdomen, when ambient temperature drops, and loosening contact when conditions warm. And through that continuous physical contact, the parent is reading the eggs constantly, not consciously, not deliberately, but physiologically, detecting subtle differences in surface temperature, density, and the micro vibrations that develop within a viable egg as the embryo grows. Researchers studying incubation behavior found that parent birds can detect non-viable eggs, eggs that have failed to develop an embryo, or whose embryo has stopped developing, through these contact cues. The difference between a viable and non-viable egg is detectable to the incubating bird well before any external change in the egg's appearance would be visible to a human observer. When a parent removes an egg, it is almost always acting on information it has gathered through this continuous contact. The egg it removes is not random. It is the egg that is no longer producing the thermal and vibrational signals associated with normal development. The parent is not being cruel. It is being precise. A non-viable egg occupying space in the nest is a resource drain. It takes up incubation surface area, forces viable eggs to be positioned less optimally, and requires the parent to heat something that will never produce a chick. Removing it allows the remaining viable eggs to be incubated more efficiently. The parent bird is making a cold, accurate, resource-based decision, using information you do not have access to, about an egg that looks to you completely normal. But non-viability is not the only reason eggs get removed. There's a second cause that operates on completely different logic: clutch size optimization. A bird does not simply produce as many eggs as it is physiologically capable of producing. It produces a clutch size calibrated to what it can successfully raise, given the specific conditions of that particular breeding season. Those conditions include territory quality, food availability, the health of both parents, weather patterns, and competition pressure from neighboring birds. A chickadee pair in a rich territory with abundant food and low predator pressure can successfully raise more chicks than the same species in a depleted territory with sparse food and multiple active predators nearby. Researchers studying reproductive success in wild bird populations found that the single most important predictor of successful fledgling production was was not clutch size. It was the match between clutch size and the parent's actual capacity to provision that many chicks. Birds that attempted to raise more chicks than their territory could support fledged fewer healthy young than birds that raised smaller clutches in well-provisioned territories. Evolution, working over millions of breeding seasons, produced a behavioral response to this pattern. Birds assess their breeding conditions during egg laying and sometimes during early incubation, and when those conditions deteriorate significantly below what was expected when laying began, they adjust the clutch downward. A late spring cold snap that reduces insect availability by 50% changes the provisioning calculation for a pair of bluebirds that laid 5 eggs, expecting a warm, insect-rich May. A clutch of 4 becomes more viable than a clutch of 5 when the food landscape shifts under them. The removed egg is not a failure. It is a recalibration. The parent is adjusting its reproductive investment to match the reality it is actually in, rather than the reality it expected when it started. There is a third category of egg removal that involves a completely different kind of detection. And this one has been driving an evolutionary arms race in your neighborhood for millions of years. Brood parasitism. The brown-headed cowbird does not build a nest. It does not incubate eggs. It does not raise its own young. Instead, it locates the active nests of other species, warblers, vireos, sparrows, flycatchers, watches until the host parent leaves, enters the nest, removes one of the host's eggs, and lays its own egg in its place. The cowbird egg then gets incubated by the host parent, hatches slightly ahead of the host's own eggs because of a shorter incubation period, and the cowbird chick, which grows faster and more aggressively than the host's own young, outcompetes the host's chicks for food delivery. In many cases, the cowbird chick is so much larger and more demanding than the host's own chicks that the host's young starve. The host pair spends an entire breeding season raising a chick that is not theirs and producing no young of their own. Some host species have evolved the ability to recognize and remove cowbird eggs. American robins eject foreign eggs with high accuracy. Yellow warblers, which cannot eject cowbird eggs without risking damage to their own, sometimes respond by building a new nest floor directly over the parasitized clutch, entombing the cowbird egg and their own eggs beneath a new layer and starting the clutch again. Researchers have found yellow warbler nests with up to 6 layers, each representing a separate cowbird parasitism event, followed by a new nest floor construction. But cowbirds have co-evolved alongside this detection ability. Cowbird eggs have become more similar in appearance to host eggs over time, a slower, smaller, color-closer version of their ancestral egg in response to the selective pressure of host rejection. The arms race between parasite and host is ongoing, operating in the nests in your yard right now, producing evolutionary change at a timescale that makes human history look brief. The egg a robin ejects from its nest is not always a failed egg. Sometimes it is a cowbird egg the robin accurately identified through visual inspection alone. And sometimes, in species that have not developed robust rejection ability, it is a cowbird egg that the host parent cannot distinguish from its own and raises at the cost of its entire breeding season. There is one more egg removal behavior worth understanding, and it is the one that happens most frequently in nest boxes in backyards across North America. Interspecific nest takeover. House sparrows, which are not native to North America and did not evolve within the ecological community of North American cavity nesting birds, compete aggressively for nest cavities. When a house sparrow decides it wants a cavity currently occupied by bluebirds, tree swallows, or chickadees, it does not simply compete for the whole. It enters the nest, removes or destroys the eggs already present, kills the nestlings if any have hatched, and sometimes kills the adult birds if it catches them inside. Researchers monitoring nest box populations have documented house sparrow takeover events repeatedly and consistently. The behavior is not aberrant. It is normal house sparrow reproductive strategy in the North American context, a species with no natural behavioral constraints against displacing the birds it competes with because it did not co-evolve with them. The egg you find on the ground beneath your nest box in May not have been removed by the parent bird at all. It may have been thrown out by a house sparrow in the process of claiming the box for its own use, and the parent birds, the bluebirds, the tree swallows, the chickadees, may be sitting nearby watching a breeding season end that they had spent weeks preparing for. Monitoring your nest boxes actively during the breeding season, removing house sparrow nests promptly when they appear, and installing entrance hole baffles that reduce sparrow access are among the most directly impactful things a backyard birder can do for native cavity nesting species. So here is what an egg on the ground beneath a nest actually represents. Not always a failure, not always an accident, not always evidence that something went wrong. Sometimes it is a parent bird acting on physiological information you do not have access to, removing a non-viable egg with precision and efficiency that serves the surviving eggs in the clutch. Sometimes it is a pair recalibrating their reproductive investment in response to conditions that changed after laying began, choosing to raise fewer chicks well rather than more chicks poorly. Sometimes it is a robin that accurately identified a foreign egg and ejected it before it could cost the pair their entire breeding season. And sometimes it is evidence of a conflict happening in the nests of your neighborhood that has been running for millions of years, between species trying to raise their own young and species trying to outsource that work to someone else. The nest in your yard is not a peaceful cradle. It is the site of some of the most consequential decision-making in the bird's entire life. Every egg present represents an investment. Every egg removed represents a calculation. And the parent, sitting on that nest, rotating those eggs dozens of times a day, reading them through continuous physical contact. That parent knows things about what is in front of it that you cannot see from the outside. The next time you find an egg on the ground beneath a nest, do not assume it fell. Consider that it may have been placed there by a parent that had more information than you did and made the only decision that gave the rest of the clutch its best chance. That is not failure. That is precision. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found an egg beneath a nest in your yard and wondered how it got there? What did you do? I want to hear what you saw. I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.